Well, it's 1 o'clock Eastern Time, and it's time to get started. Hello and welcome to the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A session. I'm Dave McCormick from Alpha Software, and I'm joined here today by Dion McCormick, no relation, who is our lead solutions engineer here at Alpha. Today, Dion has got something planned for you. I believe he's going over the roadmap for Alpha Anywhere, and then he will be answering your questions. Now, a couple things to know before we get started. The first is that we do take questions, so please enter them into the questions box of the GoToWebinar interface. Ideally, get your questions in early so that we can go through them, and I'll be asking them of Dion later on after his presentation. Second thing is that these sessions are recorded. You can find copies of these recordings at videos.alphasoftware.com. Just scroll down to the end and choose the video library to open the video library to find the videos. So let's get started. Hello, Dion, are you there? I see that you're on mute.
Yes, sir. Just making sure we keep it nice and clean.
Excellent. Excellent. I'll go ahead and make you the presenter. Let me try it again.
There we go.
Okay, you should see a dialogue now.
Yes, sir.
Great. Okay.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Excellent. Good. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to spend with us. My name is Dan McCormick, and I'm working with the Alpha team. So the focus today is on, first, your questions. So if you have any questions, please put them into the questions section of the GoToWebinar control panel. You can find that in your control panel. Just put them in, type them in. Dave will start reviewing them, and we'll present them to me, and we'll try our best to answer them. If we can't answer them, we will, of course, follow up with you and or do it in a future webinar of ours there. But before we get to your questions, I want you to go start typing in there because it'll give you plenty of time to think and get it in there. I'm going to do a quick overview of the first part of the Alpha product roadmap. This is the roadmap that was presented at the Alpha Anywhere. Let me go ahead and open this up. Anywhere DEF CON 2015, and it was done by Selwyn. He went through the roadmap in terms of what we are focusing on and improving it, and including the next release, which is really Alpha Anywhere V4, which is scheduled for the first quarter of next year. So that's literally just around the corner. And there's so many exciting and powerful capabilities. It's really the maturity of the tool just continues to get better and better. One thing that won't be seen in this product roadmap is underneath it, the team continues to enhance the speed, operation, download times, etc., to general improvements. But these are the highlights going forward in terms of the next release. And really the neat thing about this roadmap, and I like to share it, is first and foremost, it helps you address current things you're trying to do quicker, easier, faster, with less work. And more importantly, it enables whole new ranges of capabilities that you may not even have thought of before. So this is very exciting stuff. The team's working very, very hard on this, and I'm excited to be able to present that to you today. So before I go there, I just want to do a process check with Dave, make sure my voice and the screens are coming through okay.
Yep, everything's coming through.
Excellent, great. So the way we break it down into the roadmap is into multiple specific areas. So you'll see there's kind of these larger blocks which talk about the general functional area that we're going after. And then within that, we're going to be adding in different kind of core pieces. So the first and foremost, which we spent most of the time at the developers conference, was mobile optimized forms. And this is the new ViewBox and ViewForm technology. This technology allows you to create brand new, fresh, incredibly powerful new mobile interfaces that are better optimized for the mobile platform. They're lighter, they're faster, and far more flexible in terms of the ability to make it so that you can create your own controls. You're not limited just to the keyboard, etc. A very, very powerful set there. And one thing I like that is really powerful about the mobile optimized forms is that the team is focused on making it easier and easier for you to integrate off-the-shelf HTML into your application. So you can further divide sort of what I call the design aspect where someone designs a beautiful screen in HTML and CSS, which could be a very skilled designer. And then there's the plumbing, which is then how do I wire up that beautiful interface so that I can connect it to enterprise systems, to third-party web services, etc. So one of the key things about the roadmap, specifically in the mobile optimized forms, is that separation between user interface design and the plumbing, which you need both to be successful with. But the great thing about that is it's really going to allow you to create better looking interfaces, be able to do it in a far shorter period of time. And what I like is tap into an enormous amount of really talented people out there. They don't have to learn Alpha. They can be designing the interfaces with their native tool sets, such as Photoshop, Dreamweaver, etc. And then they can take that HTML, CSS and bring it into our environment. And you can find very talented people on things like Upwork and what's the other one? Fiverr, many different places. There's just so many talented people. You can tap into it. So the hallmark feature for this is mobile optimized forms, which is the new form view, form box, our form view and form box, our view box and form view. And this is really where the team is spending most of the time. So that's kind of what you're going to see as the most visible aspect of the upcoming release, is that area there. It includes the form view control, as I mentioned, the ink control, which if you haven't, go online. There's actually a video, a number of videos now online at alphaanywhere.com that show these capabilities, but the ink control allows you to have the ability to have a picture and draw on top of it, to have a cold driving, which is really powerful for field applications. There's new audio controls and video controls that allow you to capture and play back that information using the PhoneGap environment to make it much more powerful to collect data out in the field and be more efficient on there. So very, very cool stuff. But that form view control is the #1 aspect and the hallmark feature from that standpoint. The other is that we're going to have improved offline functionality for mobile optimized forms. We have this new thing called the client-side data cache. And we'll do actually a demonstration of all these elements as we move through the next couple months. Really, this is all a roadmap for Alpha, but a roadmap for our weekly webinars to start getting you used to and understanding what these things are. But I love this one because client-side cache is enormously powerful, especially when you have a mobile disconnected. So let's say, I'm going to take a great example of that, is that let's say you have an application and it is a ordering application and it has a set of product codes that you order. And these product codes don't change very often. Maybe they're every 6 months or so. So you don't want to have to sit there and hit the database and hit the server every time you want to look up a product code. What you can do is now cache that information locally on the mobile platform, and thus the speed of operation is off the charts and disconnected. So having that ability to cache specific, more, I kind of call it static-oriented data, like a list of states or a list of countries. It doesn't change very often, so that's what's going to be there, and it's really child's play to put that together. What's great is the system completely controls it for you, so you don't have to do a whole bunch of coding to make that happen. And then last but not least, and this is a hallmark of Alpha software, is that not only are we going to give you these new features, which are extremely powerful, have an enormous amount of capability that you can adjust, but we are also adding a quick start genie. So therefore you'll be able to, much like the list control, which I've demonstrated before, instead of having a blank page and saying, well, how do I put this on there, you'll be able to use the genie, which will create that sort of framework for your application on the UX control, and then go in and modify it from there. And this is a huge time saver. When you're learning the technology, it's always good to have an example to work off of. That's how I do it. I look at an example, learn from that, and then start building my own. Secondly, if you're in a rapid prototyping situation, instead of having to hand draw and hand code everything, you can use this quick start genie to get something up and running, get it in front of the client, and then go ahead and then go through an iterative process from there. So the Quick Start Genie will be part of our mobile optimized forms. It is a huge part of it just because it allows you as a developer to learn the technology and also deploy it faster for your clients. So that's the big chunk, and that's where the most of it, that's where Dan and Selwyn and the team have really been investing an enormous amount of time and effort to make that happen. Okay, so that's mobile optimized forms. Now, I'm going to go through the top row today, and then we'll catch and do the second row next week, just because I want to make sure we have plenty of time for Q&A for you. So the next is data connectors. So first part was, think of it as the pretty looking face on the business. The second is really plumbing, and that's the data connectors. And we are going to be introducing new connectors for non-SQL database sources. As you've seen before, Alpha has an incredibly simple way to interface with SQL databases. Basically, you have the connection string, and then from there, you can use point and click to basically do everything you need to do on those databases. And what's really powerful about that concept, and this is what draws over into this new technology, is that Alpha, to a large degree, shields you from a lot of the complexity of having to figure out how to call that database, how to interpret the results back, how to manipulate it, etc. And what's really neat is that once you've done a connection string, you can do it to multiple different database types, and you don't have to worry about each one operates a little differently. Very, very powerful there. So we're going to apply the same concept where we're going to have data connectors, very similar to SQL connection strings, and they will be accessed using our same infrastructure, and they will allow you to use the same grid and UX components, so you could build data-bound UXs, you can build grids, edit grids, but the item are going to be first OData, which is a very popular data source out there. Things like SAP, SharePoint, etc. use that technology. Mongo, which is a new JSON document-based database. A lot of people are using that for rapid prototyping, very powerful, very easy. Couch, which is another new modern, basically, database methodology. It's called a key value pair database. And then also, which is really cool, is that they're opening it up. So if you have some kind of weird data source you need that we don't address, you'll be able to create your user-defined. And it'll cause, you'll have to do a bit more coding and setting up, but then once you've done that work once, then it's going to operate like any other SQL database connector or these other pieces. And it really makes it easier, since you're really familiar with the SQL database paradigm. It makes you easy for you to engage with these new technologies and leverage them effectively without going through this massive learning curve. Very, very powerful there. So that's data connectors. And again, that's plumbing, but very powerful plumbing, because it allows you in a great way to connect into some very modern technologies that are being used out in the marketplace and leverage that for your business. Then we now have a similar situation with web services. And web services is hot. This one's really, really powerful. And actually, I've got an example of that we just did. But the idea is that now more and more people are exposing their systems as web services. And these web services are available. So let's take a couple examples. Web services such as Yelp for looking up information about retail and location places there. You have web services like QuickBooks, where you're connecting into QuickBooks through a web service to actually put information in and get information out of an accounting system. Almost every system out there now offers a web service because it allows them to connect themselves into a greater ecosystem and take advantage of other people. So now you don't have to build everything in a single tool. You can connect these pieces together. And so the first step towards really allowing you as an alpha developer to take advantage of this incredibly powerful trend is to allow you to build connectors to SOAP web services. And I won't go into the details right now. We'll show a demonstration. But SOAP is sort of the traditional way data has been transferred back and forth between systems, but it allows you to wrap these services very easily and treat them just as a function call. And so it makes your life very simple. So it allows you to build this connector, and then that connector will automatically expose the different functions and the input-output parameters of that function. So let's take an example of that. Let's say there's a SOAP interface to an accounting system. So by building this connector, you're going to have the functions for create invoice, read invoice, create bill, create client, etc. And then you'll have the input-output parameters of those function calls, which will be then like if I'm creating an invoice, I have invoice number, date, due date, etc., yada, yada, yada. And so it allows you to create these wrappers for these SOAP web services with a point-and-click methodology, and therefore you can enable incredible amounts of new capability in your systems. And it doesn't require you to do a whole bunch of heavy lifting to do that. Whereas before, you could always do it within alpha, and I want to be clear on that. You could always do it inside alpha. But the downside of it is you had to do a fair amount of XBasic coding to kind of get it set up, figure it out, do all those pieces. This goes a long way towards helping you just point and click. It inspects that web service, it grabs the information, creates a nice little XBasic function that you can call that's going to make your life very, very easy and allow you to get these things online and working much, much quicker. So that one I'm very excited on because there's so many cool SOAP web services out there that your applications tap into to make them much, much more valuable instead of having them as sort of an island standing on their own. Okay, so the last one I'm going to cover right now, and then we'll cover the rest next week, is Node.js. And I've talked about this a little bit before, and I'm going to spend just a few moments and then we'll get into the questions. But we already have this capability in the system, meaning that what ships with the Alpha application server is Node and development system is Node.js and the Google V8 JavaScript engine. And the reason that's very powerful is that more and more people are starting to use JavaScript not just as a language for web browsers and mobile platforms, they're actually starting to use them as what's called a server-side language. So, for instance, our XBasic is a server-side language. .NET, functionality was kind of server-side. But now you can actually use JavaScript and on the server side to actually write code that does like calculations, lookups, and things like that. And you could always do it, but there was a bit of a kind of a process to connect your XBasic code into Node.js. You kind of had to go through a certain series of steps. But the power of that is that there are an enormous number of Node.js libraries. And this is the coolest part, and you're going to love this, is that most modern systems now, such as things like Dropbox, Box.net, I mean, you look at it, they usually come with or allow you to download a Node.js library that is already pre-configured that knows how to talk to that service. And so therefore they've already done kind of the heavy lifting of providing you a library. And then what we can do is connect that Node.js library into Alpha to then call that service. So what will be nice is you can say if you want to like upload a file to Dropbox, you can basically call JS library on your server, which will then communicate with Dropbox and then do the transaction and report back the results from there. And so what Alpha is really, and I won't go there, but what Alpha is doing is making it far easy for you to say, copy a library into the app server. Then in your code, you can say, okay, call within XBasic this Node.js library, and it's going to be very seamless. And also, which is very, very cool, is the ability to debug into Node.js code. And this is a little bit more sophisticated, but maybe required for people. So basically, Node.js has been there, but it's loosely coupled. Now Alpha is focusing on bringing that in and tightly coupling the potential relationship that you can leverage. And really the heart of it is that there are an amazing number of Node.js libraries out there that allow you to talk to systems. Like one I saw the other day, which was really cool, is that Google offers a whole Node.js library to, for instance, create Google Sheets, to read Google Sheets, to create Google Docs, to read Google Docs. So if you had a client that had to have things on Google, like had people putting things on Google Sheets, and you wanted to grab that data and bring it into your system, all you'd have to do is bring in the Node.js library, kind of get an idea of it, and then set it up to make calls into Google to make those calls to get that data out of it. And it's really, we'll do a demonstration of that down the road when they release it, but it really opens up huge new potentials for you to expand the footprint in the Alpha solution, and most importantly, make it so that Alpha is a good citizen throughout all of that. So we have mobile optimized forms, really the heartbeat of it all, the customer facing, the user interface piece. We have data connectors that are connected into third-party services. We have web services also that we're going to be able to wrap SOAP services to make it easier. And last but not least is Node.js. And what you'll find is that in certain projects you may want to use a web service. Other projects you may pick a Node.js. Beauty of it is you choose what is the fastest, most efficient way for you to build that functionality and get it in the hands of your clients, and we'll be able to support you. So improved capability, improved openness, really exciting stuff. We've got some other things coming down the road, which I'll go through and cover next week, but I want to go ahead and hold it off there and open it up for the Q&A, and I want to say thank you and get excited. This stuff's amazing. You got a big learning curve ahead of you, and we're going to be working heavily to help you go through that curve so that you can take advantage of all these great new capabilities and improve and enhance and do whole new things with your technology and with your platforms.
Excellent. Thanks, Dion. And we do have questions, so let's get started. This is a good sort of general general question. Here's a person who has a working app that they created for a client, and then they wanted to create a copy of that application. This is a web application, a web or mobile. And so they started by creating a new A5W start page, and they've changed the publish settings. But what else do you have to sort of take into account if you decided that you want to replicate an app to use it for a different purpose?
Oh, interesting. Okay. So is this like you want to basically use it as a template to start a new project and then make a bunch of modifications, say, for a second client, but it'll be kind of a separate entity. Would that be a valid? I'm just trying to make sure.
That's right. It'll be a separate entity. I'm going to say even maybe on a separate server. They have different publish settings and everything. So it wasn't designed to be a multi-tenant app.
The idea is you're kind of diverging the code into two code sets.
Right.
There is a really powerful tool out there. Okay, so how, just to show you an example of it, is that Alpha, if you go in the development environment, and let me go ahead and open this up. Is that coming through okay? Are you seeing my development environment?
Yep, it sure is.
Okay, great. Alpha really doesn't have a save as function. It's just not built into the technology, just historically. So, I mean, to copy a application, and these are all my test applications, etc., I could say, okay, I want to take this, this CPEPS, and I can sit there and say copy and paste. Now, the only downside of that is that it's going to copy all of the core files, but it's going to keep the same name of the sort of the core database or core workspace. So that can be kind of problematic because sometimes you want to call it something completely new, you know, for a different person. So you kind of want to use that existing as a template on there. Well, Steve Wood has a Windows batch file that he created. And we can put a link. We'll have to figure out how to put a link to it. But it's a very simple batch file that he created a long time ago, which I use. And so what's cool about this batch file is that what it will do is you point it to a solution. So let's say I want to take this CPPS solution and call it ABCD. You know, and I have to go through and manually rename all this stuff, the folder names, the file names, etc. Complete nightmare. So what happens is that this copy project, you run it as a bat file, you point it to the directory where your existing solution is, you give it the new name, and what it will do is basically clone that one with all of its settings, everything's the exact same thing, into a new folder. And then you can go in and start editing that new project under the new name. And I highly recommend that because after a while, if you have like 5 projects and they're all named the same, it could get confusing. You could be editing the wrong thing and everything else like that. So I'll send a link to, we'll have to figure out how people can get access to it. It's a non-supported product, meaning that nobody guarantees it's going to work perfectly, etc. It's just a nice little utility that Steve Wood built a long time ago, and I've used successfully. It seems to work fine. I haven't had any problems. But it will save you a lot of time, and it'll also allow you to make sure.
Oh, sorry, hang on a second. Dan, are you back?
No problem.
Okay. There you go. I upgraded you to organizer in the. Okay, Dan, sorry, I just upgraded you to an organizer, and I think just that last part cut out, so I apologize.
Oh yeah, just again for people, I just want to let them know it's unsupported. It's just kind of a nice utility that the community put together. But once you've done that, then you go into that application. You'll usually when you're deploying it, you'll set up a new folder and new database up on the server to handle the new environment for that new client or so. So after you've kind of copied your environment, or you've copied your development files, you can start editing and modifying them. Then what you're going to do is on your application server, you usually need to create a clone of the database into a new database. You need to create a folder to hold the new application, and then you go into your publishing settings to then modify that this new app publishes to this folder and points to this database. And once you've got those things done, you're off to the races and you're in good shape. So the process is clone your current application, set up your app server with the new database and with the new folder where it's going to be residing. It could be a whole new server, but often you just need another folder on your existing server because Alpha can run multiple applications on a single server. And then what you do is you go into your publishing settings to modify those elements to say, okay, when I publish this new thing, I want it to go point to this database, this new database, and I want it to go to these folder sets. And literally, you know, the reality is you could have that all done in about 10, 20 minutes once you get used to it. It's just a pretty straightforward kind of process.
Great. So let's try a little experiment. Because I've made you the organizer, and GoToWebinar now has a new or newish feature called Handouts. And maybe you see that, Dion, in your control panel. And you might be able to
I see Handouts right there.
You might be able to drag and drop that file right into Handouts.
Let me do that. So first I got to copy it.
This has never been tried, people, just so you know.
I know. This is the flying Walindas, flying without a map. There's, okay, let's go to Dropbox. Go to, what's it called? It's a bat file. Where is that? Ah, there we are. Okay. Handouts. I'm dragging it onto my Handouts section, but nothing seems to be happening.
Is there a choose a file button next to it, or has it not been expanded?
Yeah, it just says Handouts 0, so it might be something we need to set up.
Is there a little arrow next to it, though? Can you expand it, I guess?
Yeah, I expanded it. It's just empty.
Oh.
But let me go into the control panel. So let me go to the control panel, okay, and options. I'm looking at my different folders here. Yeah, there's not much I can do to send that out. I'm sorry, guys. I don't see.
No problem.
I think when you create the webinar, it may do that or allow you to add handouts at that time, but it doesn't seem to be able to allow me to do it.
Okay.
At this point here.
All right, I will.
But I'm trying to think. Yeah, I hate to tell everybody. Oh, you know what? Let me do this.
Okay.
Okay, bear with me. Everybody good on that? Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, get it while it's hot. I'm putting my Dropbox link in there.
Nice.
So for you guys watching down the road, it may not exist. So get it while it's hot.
Benefit of attending live. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. I'll try to. So I'll try to leave it there for a long time.
All right, so you'll drop that in chat. Excellent. So that's in the chat window if you guys want that batch file. So some more questions. Let me just go back to that list here.
Oh, by the way, that I got that off the message board, so you can always search the message board for the link to that file.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great. And it was posted by Steve Wood.
In case you're watching this a month from now and you can't get that Dropbox link, okay. Go onto the Alpha message board and search for copy, the copy bat file, and it will be on there. It's in an older discussion.
Excellent. Here's a question. What's the easiest way to apply conditional formatting to a multi-choice drop-down box so that each selection has a different background color?
Interesting. Well, yeah, that's good. That's a very interesting problem. I have not done multi-choice, but let's take a look at this real quick. So let me go ahead and create a new UX. Oh, I can move a little too fast. I'm sorry, everybody. I'm in the Alpha Anywhere development environment. I'm at the Web Projects control panel. You'll notice I have web components, and I've got a whole bunch of my demonstration UXs, etc. I'm going to create a new one. And for people who are new, the UX component is our form component and really is the heart of the system as far as creating forms for the user interface. So I'm going to create a new one of that. I could use a off-the-shelf template that we already ship with, but in this case I'm going to start it out as blank, and I now have a blank UX control. There's some help files, videos, and things like that. That's actually always kind of, the overview is nice because you can click here and they have some videos you can watch and some quick instructions, etc. But I'm going to go ahead and add what's called a drop-down box. I can call it drop-down box. Okay. And the drop-down box has been placed in my form. So on the left-hand side is, and again, this is for people who are experienced, bear with us, these are all the different controls that are available. I have a very rich set of controls that are available to the user. And what I did is I created a example of that control in my user interface called drop-down box. And so the actual item is here, and on the right-hand side, we have the properties for that drop-down box. So we define everything about that drop-down box. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit until you see drop-down box properties. And I have choices here. And so I'm going to say, okay, for this drop-down box, I'm going to have a set of choices. And then I'm going to, in this case, I could have static choices, dynamic, I can look up the choices from a database, variable, I can actually, populate a variable at the server level and then populate it that way. But I'm just going to use this. And the way you do it is first item 1, second item 2, and third item. So you'll see in here I've got a human readable version of the text plus then what's called the pipe character and then the index item. So when someone selects first item, what it's actually going to set for the value of that drop-down box would be what's the second item, the number 1 or number 2 or number 3. And this can get very sophisticated. There's many ways you can do it. There's lots of instructions on that. But I'm going to do that. And what's really kind of cool is you can save this list and restore it if you use this list over and over. So now I click Save, and if I show you a live preview of the system, bear with me as I start up my thing there. Okay, sorry, there's a phone ringing in the background. I'll be gone in a moment. So I have the drop-down box, and you'll notice that it's populated with first item, third item. So hold on, let me mute this real quick. Okay. Jeez Louise. Sorry, I'm borrowing someone's room. And
Dion is actually on the road this week. A lot of his demos are not done from location.
Bring it down so we don't hear it there. I'm sorry about that. I hate to interrupt everybody. So now we have the drop-down box, and you'll notice that it's populated with first item. So you're seeing that first part of it, which is the human readable part. You're not seeing the second part, which is the piece there. Okay, so the question now, and I appreciate our person on there, is that how do we modify this drop-down list so that it can have things along the lines of color coding for different items? And to be honest, I'm kind of exploring here to see what goes on in here. And let's see if we have conditional formatting. I don't know if there's conditional formatting on this one here. I wanted to show everybody what a drop-down box, how to do that piece there. Yes, we do have conditional style. So let's look at that right here. So the idea is you have this kind of fixed kind of situation where it's having a list of items you can select from. And you'll notice that I kind of searched the properties here where I have conditional style and stuff. You'll notice I did that manually, but I could have clicked up here and started typing conditional, and it would have brought up. That's one thing that's really good for new people, is that if you're kind of confused where something is, there's a lot of search capabilities to find that. So I went ahead and did that from that standpoint. Now we'll see if this works. I can't guarantee that it does, but we'll go ahead and click on this. And so we have this condition here, and this is where we're setting the conditional style, meaning that if a condition is met, let's highlight that. So let's give it a chance. So let's go insert drop-down box equals to 1. And actually, I'm sorry, let me do one thing real quick. Right now I have this as type character. If we look at our choices, they're like 1, 2, 3, those are integers. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to set it as numeric. So now it treats it as numeric. And I'll show you another trick in a moment. That brings up a question I get a lot, so I'll do that. So now that's numeric, I'm going to go back to my conditional style, and let's give this a try. I'm going to add the condition. I'm going to say if drop-down box is equal to 1, then what I want to do is let's fill this with red. So you'll notice that here's what the style is going to apply. So that's style number 1. So now what we can do is we can say insert field name, drop-down box, and then put in, let's say the color's yellow. Now, oops, drop-down box equals 2. Okay, kind of ugly, so let's do filling with yellow with a black front in there, okay? So now let's go ahead and save that. Now there's a question, I'll have to come back to that. I think I know. Okay, now notice what's happening that it's doing there. Now that's probably, I think what the user's looking for, and I apologize, I don't have the exact answer off the top of my head, is that what's going on here is that when I select the value of this, it's setting the color coding of this field. I think what they're looking for is that when you have a Let me go to the first item here, second item, so it's easier to read. So my thinking on this is what they want is that certain rows of these drop-down box items are color-coded with a specific color. So I don't think they want to change the field name. I think they want to do the conditional formatting of that. And I do not know if there's actually a way to format the specific, have it dynamically formatted. If I were to approach that, I would use the following. Is what I would do is I might use a list control, and that list control allows you to have much more control over the representation of the data. So you can actually create a list control that can do a pop-up, so you can achieve the similar kind of situation. But I don't think there's an off-the-shelf way that allows you to modify the color coding of the items in a drop-down box.
Here's a question. If the
Sure.
human readable part of that, I wonder if you can insert HTML.
Yeah, I'm wondering. Yeah, let's try that.
Like
I see what you're
saying.
saying.
Do like a span ID equals something,
yep.
And then use JavaScript.
Let's just try
bold, for example. Yeah, let's try bold.
Let's just try that.
Yeah.
Okay. If this works, then you've got the solution. So let me go ahead and try this, and let's go ahead and do the working preview. Okay. Notice it's not interpreting.
HTML escaped it. Okay.
Yeah, so my gut feel is that the drop-down box is really meant just kind of for textual information,
yep.
Not really available to do that. Let's see, any other settings on here to say, yeah, no. So what I would probably do is this, and let me go ahead and show you an example of how you might be able to pull that off. So let me go ahead and I'm going to create a list. I'm going to first create a button. Let's go to text box, hello, or let's call it item, okay? And this is the power of alpha. There's always many ways to cook the to cook the goose here. So I'm going to create a list in here, and I'm going to call it list selections. A little more work, but it still works the same way. I'm going to take this, and I'm going to put that into a special container called a window container. And I'm going to create that window container. And by the way, if you're curious about what window container is, there's a great webinar about a month and a half ago where we walked through all the different types of containers. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to Windows Property, and I'm going to select a predefined, I'm going to select this as a drop-down window. So the idea is this won't show until this window is obvious. So let me go ahead and save that, and we'll go drop-down box color. Okay, so I put we'll do a working preview here, and you'll notice in here that I'm not seeing that list control. I'm just seeing the item right here. So now what I can do is I can go into this list of selections, and I'm going to change this, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use static data, and I'm just going to insert some sample data, which is called this. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and go to my list layout, and I'm going to add those items into the list layout. Okay. So now that I've got that list layout, I'm going to do one other thing, which is I'm going to have a click event on this, which shows the window. So show, and I'm going to show my window. Okay, so now that we've got that, now we can save that, go to live preview real quick. So it doesn't show, but now when I click there, you'll notice that it's brought up essentially like a drop-down box. And this can be, and it doesn't look right because I would have to get rid of the header and things like that. But here's the power. If I'm in my list of selections, I go to my list properties, and I go to the static data, I believe I can put in here, I can have that coming in. I can have it be it's treated as HTML. So let's go ahead and say that.
Whoop,
I don't want to break.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, let's give me that trap there. Okay. So I'm gonna show you one other way to cook this goose in a minute. So you notice John is highlighted. So that could be a column. It could be anything else. Actually, there's this cool way if you're in a list here. If you go to the fields, we actually have conditional style on that first name. So for instance, let me go back and adjust this real quick. And we're kind of jumping around, but this is all very good stuff to know. So it's John, okay. So that's back to my plain list, but what I'm going to do is go to my fields. I'm going to go to my first name field. I'm going to go to conditional style. And I'm going to say if first name is equal to John, then I'm going to make it a, oops, no, I want the background to be, I want it to be yellow with red. Okay. So we click OK. Save that, go into live preview. Voila. Because it is building each of these rows individually as a list control, we can do it. And I can clean this up. And then what you would do is you put an on-click event that when you click this, it closes the window and inserts the value there. And you can create a very nice looking scrolling list there. Now, I'm going to go ahead and show you one other method to do that. And this is actually another alternative that may achieve the same results. So I'm going to add another text box control in here. And I'll go item 2, okay? And in this item 2, I'm going to scroll down here, and I'm going to select, it has a, and I'm going to click lookup. And then it's asking me what kind of lookup type. In this case, I want a grid component. And now what I can do is I do the lookup definition. I select an existing grid in my system that I've already related. And remember, in a grid, you can do conditional styles. You can do, the sky's the limit. It's just impressive what you can do with the grid. So let me find a good grid here. Let's see if that one works there. And then I click OK. Bear with me. I have to get, because of my screen, there we go. Click OK. Oh, and then I have a field map here, so I go into, so I've selected the grid I'm going to show as a selector for this. Then I go to the field map and I say the item 2 is going to be filled with, in this case, the customer ID, which is in that grid. So it's looking up what fields are in my app, and what, and the neat thing is I could do multiple fields, so I could actually be grabbing multiple things from that grid. So I click OK, save it. Let's do a little preview here. Now remember, grids, may not be this. So you notice now it's got a little question mark or a little magnifying glass. When I click that, it renders my grid as a lookup here. Obviously, I have a search criteria. Most likely wouldn't need that. But then I can select this one and look what happens. So I could do a couple things. I can have this lookup kind of appear as a drop-down. 2, I could get rid of all this search stuff and make it a very minimal grid that just shows the rows. But in this grid, I could have color coding, I could have selections, etc. And then when I select that item there, oops, this is it would be a read-only grid. I click select, notice that it's grabbing the value and putting them there. So the 2 methods I would approach is, one is you can use a list. You can then use any HTML you want to conditional format it. Nice thing about a list is that it's very lightweight and it's going to just pop right up because it's essentially embedded in this form here. The second alternative, if you want to get crazy, is you can actually use what's called a lookup field with a grid component, and then you design that grid to be the same thing with color coding or icons or whatever it happens to be. But that's going to be a little heavier. It's meant more for a desktop application. If it's a mobile application, definitely look at using the list of selections. If you're doing desktop, grids can also be very powerful, but they're both applicable, both used to be there. So a bit of a long-winded explanation as usual, but I think you'll see that, there's different ways to skin the cat if you can't get a drop-down box to have dynamic formatting of the content inside the drop-down box.
Excellent. Next up, I have a question that I don't think you'll be able to answer, but it kind of points to a trend. We'll see. But it sort of points to a trend of questions that people have been asking recently. So I think it's one that will come up with the answer. I thought I'd read it because maybe it'll resonate with some other people as well. So anyway, this person has got an embedded, wants to embed a PDF file into a var binary max SQL field. So no problem. You can get the PDF file into the field. But unlike, say, a JPEG field or a text field, there isn't really a control in Alpha for showing PDFs. Can you think of a way of doing that so where it doesn't have to be shuffled out to a file or not? And again, I know this is something we talked about going over, so I don't want to put you on the spot there, Dion. But
You know, I will tell you, I'd have to research that because
okay.
I know how I can display a PDF that's on the disk in a iframe.
Right.
So what you can do is you know, the
can
question
pull
is
it out to
first,
disk,
why
sure.
are you storing PDFs inside the database? I would honestly try to move any file-oriented data out of the database. It could be historical, it could be a requirement, but
Okay.
life is so much easier for you if you manage things outside the database for two reasons. One is that the systems, it's easier to do things like you're saying where you click on a record and it shows the PDF in an iframe. So you can see it right on the screen with the record, and I have that running now. It works really well. Secondly, is that if you need to, you don't junk up your database with a ton of blob binary data. You know, third is that if you need to move or back up that data, it's merely a copy of that data from one folder to another. So you can actually use the file system. Fourth, which is really powerful, is now instead of having it on your local file system, you can be storing it on Dropbox, Amazon S3, Box.net, and thus having full security and backup of all that data, and again, without loading up your database. And fourth, which is really important, is you start building mobile platforms, the best way to handle those kind of secondary data, especially if you want to start adding video and stuff like that, that information can be handled, the app server handles the metadata and the database data, and then you can have the mobile app do like disconnected uploads of video and photo to S3, and it works really well. It just, you know, it's meant for that kind of operation there. And what's cool is then you can start, and this is very powerful, if you have a situation where someone is on a mobile platform to use that PDF information, what you can do is you can actually have the mobile platform pull down those files and cache them in the file system on the mobile device. So first, before I went down and tried to fix that, I'd ask the question of why I had PDF data stored as binaries inside my database, and I would make that move sooner than later. If not, we'll have to look into how you can do that, but I don't know of any off-the-shelf way to render PDFs based out of database other than extract it and then display it. So it may not be the answer you're looking for, but
right.
Multimedia files, everything like that should be outside the database. I look at database as metadata now more than anything else.
Okay, excellent. All right, so a couple of just simpler questions that were asked earlier on. I shouldn't say simple, we'll see. The first one has to do with, it's an XBasic question. Let me find it here real quick. Someone wants to take the result of an XBasic function and use it in a static div. It's like wondering how do you get from the XBasic portion and turn it into HTML so that it could be used in the browser.
Ah, yeah, okay. I can show you that. I think I know how to do that. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead. Don't want to do that. That's the wrong button here. I'm going to go ahead and create a new, again, creating a new UX. I'm at the web projects. In this case, it's a form. I'm going to put this UX here. I'm going to open it up there. Click OK. Okay. So now I am at my UX builder. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to go to, going to put in a label control, and I'm going to say label div goes here. Okay, so I've got a label component on there. It is empty. So if I go to a live preview and show you the preview, there's a whole lot of nothing here. Oh, I'm sorry, there is in front of this, excuse me, my field label. And so I'm going to get rid of that field label so there's nothing in there. So now you'll notice nothing's in there. So now I can go in here and I can, so what I want to do is when I launch this UX, I want to update what's inside this. So I'm going to go to my server side. And for people who are new, what happens is there's a series of events when this form is loaded on the person's web browser or mobile device. And you can trap that to then do things. So for instance, the simplest thing I can do is I can go e.control.div goes here is equal to hello webinar, folks. Okay. So now I save that. I'll go dynamic, let's see, div. I like to say these because UX, okay? So now I do my live preview and look what's in there. Oh, wait, didn't go there. Wait. Did I, label div goes there. My bad. So let me go back to here. We go label. Okay, let's see if that works this time. Notice, success. So I'll walk you through what's going on there. So there. So when I created the control, I created a label control, which is a static, non-editable control. And basically, it's just a chunk that goes right there. And I gave it a variable name, okay? So it's empty. Nothing is in there. If I wanted a default value, I could go ahead and type that in here, and that would show up, but I don't want it. I want it empty. Then in my server-side events, I have a server-side event called onDialogInitialize. And what happens is this, when this onDialogInitialize happens, it does this before it actually renders the UX to show the user. So in this case, I'm running a command that says e.control and then the field name is equal. So basically, I'm setting the contents of that control with this data here. Now, the cool thing about this is this could be /div /div, okay? There you go. So let's go ahead and see that. Nothing you're going to see exciting there. So it's not showing anything, but that div's there. Now I can go in here and I can go, like for instance, ID equals my div or whatever. I can go in and essentially put in here any of this stuff here. And then I think div has styles, right? I don't do a lot of...
Yeah, you could do style equals background color, background dash color red or something like that. Yeah.
Bear with me. Let's go to Google. Let's grab just a real example of that real quick. There's a good one. W3 schools go there all the time. That's last week people had a question on it, and that's one of the ones there.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and div style equals color. Okay? So I'm going in there and grabbing that, and I'm coming back in here, and I'm going to say style equal colors. Okay? Now there's a problem here. Notice that I have to have this in this in double quotes. I think I can put in single quotes like this, or I can use a trick in Alpha, which is a nice little trick, is that if I double quote these things, it treats these as a single double quote. So just to know everybody, so let me show exactly what I did there just so that everybody's not confused, is that I found on the net I have this style equals and then it's got double quotes in there. The problem is when I'm loading up this control, I have double quotes here. So if I paste this in there, notice what happens to the color coding. Uh-oh, it thinks this is the end of the quote there. So there's two methods to handle that. Method number one is I can put in double quotes for the quotes, and what it does is it treats both of these double quotes as a single quote. It's called escaping. You're escaping that. So now this should interpret correctly as just one chunk of text that happens to have a double quote in it. So let's go ahead and go into the, let's do a 5 there. Notice it is blue. So the system interprets whatever you load into that label, whatever the HTML, it's just HTML. I mean, I put it up on the server, off to the races from there. So what I can do, and to answer the individual's question, is that you can just go ahead and dynamically build your whole div, including, which is very important, like ID equals, my div1, because you may have JavaScript later on that dynamically modifies that div. Like, for instance, a lot of third-party charting packages, you put a div on your screen, and then what you do is you tell it, put the chart in that div or put that image in that div, and it does it from there. Now, one thing I also like to tell people about this is that this is the onDialogInitialize, but sometimes you want to use the onDialogRender. And this is more of a little esoteric concept, but there's a certain procedure where the form has to be set up. Like if you're putting in some JavaScript to do something, often everything has to be kind of set up, and then you fire the JavaScript. And that's where if you go, so all this stuff on onDialogInitialize, etc., is as it builds the form to be displayed. But check out onDialogRender, because this allows you to say, okay, the form's all ready to go. Now I want to make a few last-minute tweaks, like fire some JavaScript or do something there. So I often find sometimes it works in onDialogRender versus onDialogInitialize. And that's a bit esoteric, But when you start doing your own little JavaScript stuff, you can do it like, you can fire off a little piece of JavaScript to update something or to warn the user or fire off an animation or do something along those lines. But you're pretty good. So for the persons there, now I wanted to show you one last thing, is that as we said before, this is a problem child, is that if I have double quotes in there, it screws it up. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to copy this whole piece right here, and there's this cool little feature where I can go left caret, string or HTML and paste it in there. And what this does is this is the starter and the ending. So therefore, inside here, it ignores all the double quotes and all the other special characters. It just takes whatever this is inside those two kind of special parameters and sticks it in that variable. So the cool thing is that, like, sometimes I'll go, value is equal to hello1, and then I want a carriage return, and I go like hello2. Oh, that doesn't like that. So what I do is I go value is equal to string hello1, hello2, hello3, and the system automatically just grabs all of this and handles it for me. So I don't have to put in like terminators and line continuation and all that kind of stuff there. So let's see if this works, if I'm, smarty pants here, if it does actually do it. So let's see if it accepts that there. And it did. And just to let you know, this HTML versus string, it understands and color codes the HTML inside here. If I were to say string, it would just treat it as one big line of string that's available.
And color code says auto-suggest as well, so it's actually really super handy to use that. Yeah, I believe
yes,
so.
You're right.
Yeah.
So this is especially for what this person's use case is they want to kind of insert some HTML and other stuff in there. This actually treats as I should have started with that, shouldn't I?
It's live and learn.
Yeah. So anyway, but that's kind of, I hope that answers your question. Is basically you put a label or text label on your interface, and then use the onDialog initialize event to then populate that label with some HTML, and you have complete and total flexibility. And to be honest, I'm going to show you one last thing that's really cool here. Is I could put in here, you could actually create, pull data from data sources, then dynamically populate this following command. So like for instance, let's do this sample here. Is that, let's say I want 2 of those in a row. So what I can do is I can go like this, and I can go, okay, so basically I populate that control, and then I run another function that does it again. I should have 2 of them one after another. We'll see. Notice it's done that. And it takes care of just merging all this into one HTML statement. So I could be saying pull a data from a database, adjust the color based on that database value, adjust the text, etc. I mean, honestly, guys, a list is much easier to do this in, but there's certain scenarios where you're dynamically setting up this div to handle maybe a chart or something else, and I think that's where the user is coming from. So I hope that has answered it. I hope that was valuable.
That is excellent. All right, so I've got one more question that, let me just find my questions window again. Sometimes it disappears on me. Anyway, we do have limited time. One more question, and the question has to do with, and there won't be enough time to cover it here, but if a person here wants to recreate a rather, so I'm just going to read their words. I have been asked to recreate a rather complicated paper medical form. Can you show us where to enter the HTML5 or the CSS for mobile or web forms? That can't be done in 2 minutes, but I was wondering if maybe get started.
And there's 2 different ways to handle on that. Is that, and I'd have to have a little bit more. It's a great question, and we really appreciate you asking. We don't want to dissuade anybody. I would ask a couple quick questions since we have 2 minutes. Is that when I look at it at first, we can use what's called the absolute layout, where we can actually scan that form in as a PDF and overlay controls on top of that form. So you can literally use the form itself as the background image for a form, and then what you do is you create the controls for the data entry elements. Now, that's fast. It happens very quick. It's going to look like their form, but it doesn't, that's not really a good mobile setup. It's usually best for like a desktop web application scenario. Option number 2 is then to kind of use the new, and we'd really highly recommend, is that can you work with your client if they have to have the exact same form structure, your hands are a bit tied. But if you can now go with the alpha methodology for a form view, I think you can achieve the same thing where literally you can have, and I'd have to see if we have absolute layout, but you can show an image of that form, and then when you touch on each of the elements, it opens up a detailed editor. But I guess I just have to have a little bit more information of what the use case is and what people are trying to do with that particular form. But the answer is you can do it, but there's a couple different strategies we would take.
Yeah. And the absolute positioning with forms, while it might be fine on a tablet, you know, the problem that we're finding is that people are trying to recreate paper forms, and paper forms recreate very, very nicely on computer screens. It's the right size, but as you get smaller and smaller, especially when you get to phone size, but even tablet size, you don't have the same screen real estate. So it's really often better to sort of rethink the designs of those and to break them up into manageable pieces so that the user doesn't have such a hard time always having to pinch zoom in on parts of the screen to fill out parts of the form. But that's something we'll definitely cover in future sessions.
Yeah, as we get into the form view and we start showing you, you're going to love it. There is one other suggestion I might have, and this is a suggestion because Apple obviously doesn't have enough money in the bank, we need to help them out, is you specify that your client uses absolute layout forms with an 8.5 by 11 screen, and then force them to buy the new iPad Pro that will show the form in full resolution, and you can use their new pen to fill them out from that standpoint. All kidding aside, be a very expensive solution, but be very cool. What we are going to see is with the ink control, just to kind of build on that, is that you'll notice that Apple has invested in making the iPad Pro work like a piece of paper and pen. So it's interesting, they're knowing that it's for like graphic arts and things like that. But what I anticipate in the future is that they're going to apply that pen technology in the way they did the screens. It's really cool. They actually etch the screen to give it a little resistance. So when you're dragging the stylus, it actually feels like pen on paper. I bet within a year, their next generation iPads will all include that technology as a way for get people update. Now, the cool thing for you is that if that's true and people start adopting more of a stylus orientation, then our new ink control is awesome because you can have an ink control on one of these iPads and then be drawing on top of images and possibly filling out forms by using the methodology. So I kind of made a bet. The reality is we're going to see more and more stylus applications kind of resurge, and we're going to be in a great position to allow you to be able to handle those with the ink control and the form view system.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Again, we're 2 minutes over time. We seem to be always running 2 minutes over time. Thank you, everyone who attended. Thank you very much, Dion, for presenting, and thanks for everyone who asked questions. We hope to see you next week at this same time. In the meantime, if you have any questions, send them to guides, Guides, @alphasoftware.com. Thank you, and take care. Bye-bye.